The week after my husband passed, I counted the money in our joint checking account and realized I had exactly enough to cover 2 months of rent. That was it. 31 years of marriage, and what I had left was a number on a screen that kept getting smaller. I was 63 years old, and I had to find a job. My daughter called from Portland every other day to tell me I should move in with her and my son-in-law. I told her the same thing every time. I was not going to do that. I had lived in Hargrove, Indiana my entire life. My husband was buried here. My friends were here. What few of them were left. I was not going to pack a suitcase and become a guest in my own daughter's house, sleeping in the room next to the baby, pretending I wasn't in the way. So instead, I put on the good blazer I wore to church, and I walked into the Hargrove Community Services office on a Tuesday morning, and I asked if they needed help. They did. Their front desk coordinator had just retired, and they needed someone who could manage intake paperwork, answer phones, and keep the filing system from collapsing entirely. The pay was not impressive, but it was enough if I was careful. I started the following Monday. The office was on Clement Street, a 15-minute walk from my house. I had not owned a car since Gerald's diagnosis 3 years earlier, when driving became more trouble than it was worth. Walking was fine. I had good shoes. There was a laundromat on the corner of Clement and Birch, about halfway between my house and the office. It had a green awning and a hand-painted sign in the window that said, "Spin Cycle open 7 days." In front of it, every single morning, there was an old man. He sat in a folding lawn chair that he must have brought himself, because it was never there in the evenings when I walked home. He had white hair and a white beard, both of them overgrown, and he wore the same canvas jacket every day regardless of the weather. He had a small cardboard sign leaning against his ankle that said "Veteran." Anything helps. God bless. The first morning I walked past him, I kept my eyes forward. I am not proud of that. The second morning, I slowed down. The third morning, I stopped. I had packed a thermos of coffee to take to work because the machine in the office made something that tasted like hot pencil shavings. That morning I had packed a little extra. I crouched down and I asked him if he would like some. He looked at me for a moment like he was deciding something. Then he said, "Yes, thank you." His name was Walter. I found that out on day 4, when I brought 2 cups instead of 1, and sat on the low brick ledge beside his chair for a few minutes before I had to get to work. He shook my hand with a formality that surprised me and told me his name was Walter Briggs. I told him my name was Dorothy. After that, it became a habit. Every morning I brought 2 cups of coffee in my thermos and I stopped for 5 or 10 minutes. If I had something extra from breakfast, I brought that too. Walter was not a big talker, but he was a good listener, and some mornings I talked more than I should have. About Gerald. About how strange it felt to be starting over at 63. About the peculiar loneliness of sleeping in a house where all the furniture was still arranged for 2 people. Walter would listen, and sometimes he would say something short and precise that made me feel better than a longer speech would have. Once I told him I was worried I wasn't smart enough to keep up with the job, and he said, "You've gotten to 63 years old. You know more than you think you do." I thought about that for the rest of the day. I worked at the office for about 6 weeks before I noticed anything wrong. The Community Services Office ran several programs: meals for seniors, emergency heating assistance, a small fund for families in crisis. We were not a large operation. There were 6 of us on staff, plus a rotating group of volunteers. My supervisor was a woman named Connie, who had worked there for 12 years and knew every grant application and funding cycle by heart. She was fair and patient, and she brought homemade banana bread on Fridays. The person I could not get comfortable with was a man named Philip. Philip had started about 3 months before me, handling the financial records and disbursements. He was in his mid-30s, good-looking in an unremarkable way, and he always seemed to be having a separate, more important conversation in his head than the one happening in front of him. He was polite enough when he needed to be, but there was something off about the way he moved through the office. Something watchful. I first noticed the discrepancy by accident. A woman came in one afternoon asking about an emergency heating application she had submitted in November. According to her, she had been approved, but the check had never arrived. I looked up her file. The disbursement showed as completed, sent, cashed. I pulled the copy of the check from the folder in the filing cabinet. The name on it was hers. But when I compared it to the signed receipt, The signature was nothing like the one on her original intake forms. I did not say anything that day. I put the folder back and I thought about it overnight. The next morning I came in early and I pulled 3 more files from the past 2 months. 2 of them had the same problem: disbursements marked as sent and cashed, signatures on the receipts that did not match. I did not know what to do. I had been at the job for 6 weeks. Philip had been there longer. I did not have proof of anything, only an uncomfortable feeling and a pattern I might have been imagining. I decided to wait a little longer and look more carefully before I said anything to Connie. That Friday morning, I stopped at the corner of Clement and Birch as usual. It was cold, the kind of cold that gets through your coat, and I had brought Walter a biscuit wrapped in foil in addition to the coffee. He took it and nodded his thanks. We sat in our usual quiet for a moment. Then he said, without any preamble, "How long have you been at that office on Clement?" I looked at him. "About 6 weeks." "Why?" He wrapped both hands around the cup. "The man who does the money there. Young guy, brown coat. You want to be careful around him." I felt something go still in my chest. "What do you mean?" "I've been sitting on this corner since September," Walter said. "I see a lot. People come and go. I notice things." He paused. "He meets someone on Tuesdays. A woman. Not his wife, I've seen his wife. Different woman. They sit in the car across the street for about 20 minutes. She counts something. He takes it. Then they leave separately." I stared at him. "How do you know he's married?" "Wedding ring. And he has a car seat in the back of his vehicle." I did not say anything for a moment. I was thinking about the files, the signatures, the approved disbursements that never reached the people they were meant for. "Walter," I said carefully, "do you know what she looks like? The woman he meets?" He described her. Dark hair, late 40s, drove a silver sedan, always wore a lanyard around her neck like she'd just come from somewhere official. I did not recognize that from the description. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that Walter had just told me that whatever I had found in those files was not accidental. It was organized. There was someone else involved. "Have you told anyone?" I asked. "Who would I tell?" he said, not bitterly, just as a fact. I thought about that on my walk to the office. Who would take a report seriously from an elderly man living outside a laundromat? The answer was uncomfortable, and it made me feel ashamed of things I hadn't done. I spent that day being very careful. I did not pull any more files. I did not look at Philip differently, or at least I tried not to. I answered the phones and filed the intake forms, and I was exactly the same as I had been every other Friday. But inside, I was working through what I knew and what I didn't know, and what I needed to find out before I could go to Connie. On Monday, I came in an hour early and made photocopies of the 6 files I had already identified. I put them in a large envelope and locked them in the bottom drawer of my desk. Then I went to the cabinet and started systematically working backward through the disbursements from the last 3 months. I had been at it for about 20 minutes when I heard the front door open. It was too early for Connie. It was too early for anyone except me. I closed the filing cabinet drawer quietly and sat back down at my desk. Philip appeared in the doorway of the main office. He looked at me and his face did something complicated, like he had been expecting the room to be empty and was now recalculating. "You're early," he said. "I had some catching up to do," I said. I gestured at the inbox on my desk, which had a stack of folders in it, intake forms from last week. I fell behind. He looked at the inbox. Then he looked at the filing cabinet. His eyes moved to the cabinet and then back to me. "Anything I can help with?" he said. "No, I've got it. Thank you." He stood there for 3 more seconds, then was comfortable. Then he said, "All right," and went to his own office. I sat there and breathed. That afternoon, I went to the bank on my lunch break and made a second copy of the copies I had made, and I put that envelope in my safety deposit box. Then I went back to the office and worked the rest of the afternoon as if nothing had happened. That night, I did not sleep well. Tuesday morning, I stopped at the corner as usual. It was early enough that the laundromat wasn't open yet and the street was quiet. Walter was in his chair. I handed him his coffee and I sat down on the brick ledge. "He saw me going through the files yesterday morning," I said. Walter was quiet for a moment. "Does he know how much you found?" "I don't think so. I was back at my desk by the time he came in." "Is there somewhere you could go tonight that isn't your house?" I looked at him. "What? If he thinks you know something, he's not going to wait long. Walter said. His voice was the same calm, even tone it always was. He's been doing this for a while. He didn't get this far by being sloppy. He will try to find out what you know, and he will try to shut it down. Walter, I can't just... Is there a friend? A family member? Someone you could visit? I thought about my daughter in Portland. I thought about my neighbor Ruth Ann, who had a spare room and had been asking me to come stay with her since Gerald died. I thought about how foolish I would feel showing up on Ruth Ann's doorstep because of something I wasn't even certain about. Then I thought about the 6 files locked in my desk drawer, and the 3 more I hadn't finished looking through. There's my neighbor, I said. Go to her tonight. Don't go home first. Go directly from work. You're scaring me. Good, Walter said. I'd rather you be scared and safe. I walked the rest of the way to the office with my heart doing something irregular in my chest. I told myself I was overreacting, that Philip had probably not thought twice about seeing me at my desk early, that the whole thing was likely much simpler than I was making it. But I thought about Gerald, and about my daughter, and about the 63 years I had lived without ever doing anything particularly brave, and I thought that maybe the cost of being wrong about this was lower than the cost of being right and ignoring it. I called Ruth Ann at noon from my cell phone and told her I was going to take her up on that offer of the spare room for a few nights. She was delighted. She said she'd make the pot roast. At 4:30, I went to Connie's office and I closed the door behind me. I had been turning over how to have this conversation for 3 days. I had imagined Connie being skeptical or dismissive or telling me I had misread the files. I had prepared for all of those things. What I had not prepared for was Connie listening to everything I said without interrupting and then putting her head in her hands. I've been worried about this for 2 months, she said. She had noticed something too, a small discrepancy in the quarterly report, something she'd chalked up to a data entry error. She hadn't pushed on it because she had no proof, and because Philip had been hired with a strong recommendation from one of the board members, and because she was afraid of what it would mean for the organization if it turned out to be true. We sat there together in her office, and we looked at each other, and we both understood that we should have had this conversation a month ago. Connie called the board chair that evening. The board chair called the county auditor's office and the local police. By Wednesday morning, there were 2 people from the auditor's office in our conference room with the files I had copied, and a detective who looked about 12 years old but asked very precise questions. I told the detective about the files. I told him about the signatures that didn't match. I told him about the pattern going back 3 months and potentially longer. I did not tell him about Walter. I don't know why, except that it did not feel like mine to tell. What Walter had seen from his corner was what had prompted me to act, but what I had found was in those files, and that was what they needed. Philip did not come in on Wednesday. His phone went to voicemail. By Wednesday afternoon, the detective told Connie that they had confirmed he had accessed the disbursement system remotely and rerouted 7 checks, totaling over $14,000 into an account that did not belong to any of the program recipients. The woman in the silver sedan turned out to be a former colleague of his from a previous job, and her role was still being untangled, but the detective said it was not looking good for her either. I sat in Ruth Ann's spare room that night and ate pot roast and let her refill my iced tea twice, and I thought about all the people on those 7 checks who had applied for heating assistance and never received it. Elderly people, mostly. People on fixed incomes. People who had filled out the forms carefully and waited and trusted that the system would follow through. I cried a little, which surprised me. I had not cried much since Gerald died, and I had thought maybe I had gotten past the part of grief where tears came easily. But sitting there with Ruth Ann's good food in front of me and the relief of it being over and the anger about what those people had gone through, something loosened, and the tears came. Ruth Ann patted my hand and didn't say anything, which was exactly right. Thursday morning I went back to my corner. Walter was there. The weather had turned overnight, one of those sudden Indiana shifts where the temperature drops 15 degrees between dinner and breakfast, and he had an extra layer under the canvas jacket that I hadn't seen before. I poured his coffee and sat on the ledge and told him what had happened. He listened to the whole thing. When I finished, he nodded once, slowly. "Did they ask how you knew to look?" he said. I told them I noticed the signatures didn't match. That was true. He was quiet for a moment. The traffic on Clement picked up delivery trucks, a school bus, a man walking a large yellow dog. You did the right thing, Walter said. A lot of people would have looked the other way. A lot of people would have talked to you more than once, I said. Before 6 weeks in, he looked at me sideways. I want to ask you something, I said, and you can tell me it's none of my business if you want to. Go ahead. You used to be in law enforcement, didn't you? He was quiet for a beat longer than usual. 30 years, he said. County Sheriff's Department. Retired out about 4 years ago. Then why I stopped. I'm sorry. That's what I said I wouldn't do. It's all right. He wrapped his hands around the cup. My wife got sick. The kind of sick that costs everything, and then some. We used the savings first, then the retirement fund, then the house. He said it the way he said most things quietly, without drama, the way you talk about something that is simply true and has been true long enough that the sharp edges have worn down. She passed last spring. After that, I didn't have much reason to reorganize. I did not say I was sorry, because sorry felt small. I said, I understand something about that. He looked at me. I told him about Gerald. Not the long version, but enough. He listened the same way he always did, like the words mattered to him. We sat there for a while after that without talking, which was one of the things I had come to appreciate about Walter. The silences were easy. Before I stood up to leave for work, I asked him one more thing. Do you have family? Anyone who knows where you are? He thought about it. A son. He's in Columbus. We don't talk much. Would you want to? Another pause. Longer this time. I don't know if he'd want to. You could find out, I said. He didn't answer. But he didn't say no. The weeks after that were strange and quiet. The auditor's office spent most of November going through 3 years of records. They found the problem had started, not 3 months ago as I had initially thought, but closer to 14 months back. The total amount redirected came to just under $40,000. Some of it had already been spent in ways that would be difficult to recover. But enough of the assets were traceable that the county was able to recover a portion and set up a supplemental fund for the affected recipients. Philip was charged with 5 counts of theft and 2 counts of fraud. The woman in the silver sedan was charged as a co-conspirator. I don't know exactly how it resolved in the end, because these things move slowly through the courts. But I know they were charged, and I know the charges were serious, and I know that Connie stood in the conference room in late November and told the whole staff what had been found and what had been done about it. And she said the organization had me to thank for having the courage to bring it forward. I thought about saying that it wasn't just me, but I held my tongue. One morning in early December, I came to the corner and Walter's chair was not there. The sidewalk in front of the laundromat was empty. I stood there for a moment with the thermos in my hand and felt something drop in my chest. He wasn't there the next day either. I asked inside the laundromat on the 3rd day, and the woman at the register said she thought she'd seen him getting into a car about a week ago. A young man, she said. Looked like they knew each other. Walter had folded up his chair and put it in the trunk, and they had driven away. I thought about that on my walk to the office. I thought about the son in Columbus, and whether Walter had made a phone call, or whether the son had. I thought about how sometimes the things that need to happen find their own way to happen, slowly, when the conditions are finally right. I still walk past the corner every morning on my way to work. The chair is not there anymore. The spot in front of the laundromat is just a stretch of sidewalk like any other. But I stop there every morning anyway, just for a moment, the way you stop at a place where something important happened, even after the important thing is finished. I stand there with my thermos, and I think about Walter saying that I knew more than I thought I did. I think about how small the kindness was, 2 cups of coffee, 5 minutes on a ledge, the willingness to stop instead of keep walking. I think about $14,000 rerouted away from people who needed help staying warm through an Indiana winter, and how close I came to seeing the pattern in those files and deciding it was not my problem. I am 63 years old. I have lost my husband. I have a job that does not pay impressively and a house that is still arranged for 2 people. There are mornings when I drive to the corner of Clement and Birch, and it takes everything I have to get out of the car and walk the rest of the way. There are evenings when the house is so quiet that I put on the radio just to fill the rooms with voices. But I have also learned, later in my life than I would have liked, that the distance between doing something and doing nothing is almost always shorter than it looks. That a cup of coffee is not a small thing if it is given regularly, with attention, to a person who has been invisible for long enough. That the people we walk past every day are not background. They are people who know things, people who have done things, people who have lost things, people who are watching and thinking and waiting for someone to sit down for 5 minutes and listen. And sometimes, when you need it most, they are the ones who say the thing that saves you. Whoever you are, wherever you are, slow down a little. Stop when you can. You don't know what's waiting on the other side of that conversation. You don't know what ripple you're standing at the beginning of. I didn't. And now I do.